I think I may have made a video in the long distance past now, probably last year, with a similar title as this one, The Devil's Work. When I started to think, actually, as I make these videos, trying to, back then, when I was very much on the case of what's going on and what's happening and what we should be worried about, and I started to realise that maybe I was actually doing the devil's work for him by getting people into a state of fear by adding facts. And we were talking about the advent of the digital IDs back then, and of course 5G was very much being exposed for what it really was. We had the Precision Breeding Act, I seem to remember, last year coming in which food manipulation with some nefarious processes in the laboratory was going on, and the king had given his royal assent to that, and as I was finding out stuff, I was trying to alert people to it. Things like the bird flu, of course, last year was being given as the thing that was coming, and something called Disease X. And now we've got things like monkeypox, have we not, that people are making a lot of fun on the memes, and I don't blame them. This is the way that we push back against these things, and I think we should do more of that by laughing in the face of the elites that want to control us. But I remember then making a bit of a shift, and you'll notice, at least I hope you'll notice, that I was more trying to find the solutions and bringing on solutions, particularly guests who've got solutions, the way out of this maze of nefarious activities being thrust upon us by those people who are the parasitical elites. They think that they have the right to be able to control us, and of course they don't, and we're letting them know in no uncertain terms, of course. And I've moved away very much from a lot of that fear-based stuff, but unfortunately, and I don't like to say this about my fellow YouTubers, but I notice that many of them are still very much doing the commentary on the horrors that are supposedly coming. And then many of these supposedly coming imminently things, like I've seen last year, there were people talking about the collapse of the dollar, and you had to get your money out the bank, or something was going to happen the following week, or we were all going to die a horrible agonizing death by Christmas, or some. And then these things haven't happened, and we're still being put into a level of fear by all these things that many of my fellow YouTubers are talking about. And I think to myself, but isn't this really just keeping us in a low vibration? Is this keeping us down? Is that not what these parasitical elites, as they call themselves, want? That they want us to be in fear. And it doesn't seem to make any difference how many videos I mention or other people make and mention, that actually this is what they want. They want the fear, and that we should rise above that and be as fearless as possible, because once we have risen above the fear, they can't touch us. Once we unite and gather together and say, no, we don't consent to your nonsense. We don't want any of that. Thank you very much. We know our rights. We have our rights. They are ours. You have no control over us. Then the parasitical elite will wither and die. But until we do that, all the time that other commentators are out there sort of saying, uh-oh, look what's just happened. Uh-oh, this is coming in. Be scared. Be frightened. We're all just going to stay down. Now, I can absolutely understand that many of my fellow YouTubers probably would like to be talking more about solutions and more about positive things. But of course, the way that YouTube work and the way that psychology works is that people focus on what's going to happen to them in a fearful factor. And of course, YouTube rewards people if they have adverts on, and the more clicks you get, then you're going to get more money. And this sort of vicious circle means that if you start talking about things that most people generally aren't interested in, such as the solutions to the problem, people don't seem to be that interested in the solutions. They're much more interested in the, oh, what's coming down the line? I need to know about this, and remain in a state of fear. And then YouTube rewards those sort of videos with many more views and money. And of course, it's very easy to get very comfortable with the amount of money coming in from scaring people rigid by telling them that something awful is going to happen, and people watch. And then you get into a point where you can't get out of that vicious circle. Unless, of course, you get too near the knuckle and YouTube decide to bump you off, really, from and demonetize you or defund you or make it impossible for you to earn any money, which is where I am. And so I no longer am taking the money from the corporate, which I was, the corporate hand of YouTube and the advertisers and all of that. I have clean hands, and it doesn't matter now if I don't get very many views, which I don't anymore, as I try to focus on the philosophical, on the solutions, on food and farming, on the legal and lawful, and ways out of the problems that we seem to have got in. And I ignore as much as I can all this news. So I don't watch the television. In fact, I happened to be at somebody's house the other day, and the children were watching a film, some cartoon film. And I noticed, it was just at the end of this film, I don't have a television, so I had no idea what this film was about, but it was all to do with skyscrapers. It was in a cityscape, and all the action was in there. And then there was a lot of artificial intelligence within the story. And I started to realize, oh yes, they're normalizing being in cities. They're normalizing AI as a means to help instead of going to humans and other people who would help. And even the young are being indoctrinated, as we know, with the TV programs and of course the feature films, and they're normalizing being in an area with concrete and glass and steel and superstructures that rise up very high and make it look cool, instead of being more connected with the earth and nature and things that actually matter to us men and women of this planet. And so already they're just indoctrinating kids. Well, we know that's going on. I was just quite overwhelmed. And then at the end of this particular film, the news came on, and again it was something to do with what was going on in the Middle East, and they were showing explosions, and again more mainstream fear. And I had to walk out of the room because I didn't want to have my brain being brainwashed by all this rubbish. And people are still watching the BBC, perhaps not many of them in the numbers that they were before. But again, it is all this keeping you low vibration. There's a war going on. It's terrible. It may be coming to affect you soon. You should be worried about this. And it's like, no, we need to start focusing on the positives, not the negatives, because otherwise these things eat away at us. I've been reading a little bit, here we go, a bit of philosophy. I said I was getting into philosophy the other day. This is Arthur Schopenhauer, I think that's pronounced. He was a philosopher writing in the late 19th century. And this book is called Counsels and Maxims. And right at the beginning, he talks about, for wise people, he says, don't go in pursuit of happiness, because that's the wrong way of thinking. Actually, we are happy by default, only we don't really know it. It's just our attention is always taken away by pain. And he gives the example of a sore, which if you are very fit and everything in your life is fine, but you have a very sore point, say you stub your toe and you've got a sore toe, your focus goes on the sore toe. You're thinking about the sore toe. You're not thinking about everything else is all lovely and fine, because our attention is only drawn to the negative. The positive, the good things in life, we don't think about because we take them for granted. And so that sore toe is the thing you think about. Or if you have a bill that comes in, an unexpected high bill that you've got to pay, and you say, oh, instead of thinking about oh, I had a lovely lunch, the children are playing happily, we've been for a nice walk. You start focusing on these negative things like the bill. Oh God, how am I going to pay this? And this to me, and I think that's so true, that we take for granted all the good things in life. We take for granted healthy food, fresh air, for example, and we get very worried about these things which really are small things like the bill. Oh, how am I going to, and it absorbs you too much. How am I going to pay this? It sort of affects all the other successful and wonderful things in life by this one thing. And I think that's the problem that we have when we watch mainstream media, and many of my fellow YouTubers who are trapped into, in order to make a living, are having to sort of make these videos which have a very negative connotation and are frightening the bejesus out of people by saying, oh, I've just discovered this, look at this is about to happen. And the more that we watch that kind of content, and I don't wish my fellow YouTubers not to make a living, of course they must do that. But the more we watch the content which is frightening and negative, we are we not, doing what these parasitical elite want us to be, in that state of negativity, of concentrating on things that may or may not even happen. And I think in this truth-seeking movement, there's a lot of stuff which has just been put there to frighten us, that these parasitic elite have no intention of bringing about. They don't need to. Just the suggestion that it's happening is keeping us low, keeping our vibrations down, and preventing us from thriving, preventing us from actually raising our vibrations and have a much more happy life. And finding solutions to move away from things like debt-based currency, and healthy food, and 15-minute cities, and 5G. We're not able to think clearly and take ourselves out of all of this, because we're so busy concentrating on the myriad of things which may or may not happen that's being presented. And the sad part is that many of us who want to be free are actually welding those chains onto our own legs by sending out all this worrying messages, or believing it, or keeping it deep in our heart and letting it control us and bring us down. And that to me is very sad, because we do need to actually start looking at the things that make us happy, the things that actually make us thrive and are good for us, and accentuate those and move away from all the negative, bad connotations and things that keep us down.